Hello everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a lookat function that works for MetaHuman characters. As you see, I've already imported a MetaHuman model into the Unreal editor. So let's click on play to show you the results then. I'm going to get close to the character to see her eyes better. We can easily notice that the eyes are moving depending on where the player is in the scene, and the same happens to the orientation of the head. I think it works pretty decent and accurate with a quick response to the movement of the player. Let's start then. I've chosen to create a first-person example project because we can see better where the character is looking. The first thing we need to do is to grab the character into the scene. We can open the character blueprint now. Here on the left side of the screen we have the face mesh to see what animation blueprint is being used and where to find it. Don't forget to tick the box of Disable Post-Process Blueprint. If you don't do that, you won't be able to see the lookat in-game. We click on Compile and save the changes. We open the Anim BP as well. We need to make space on here. So let's do little by little now, baby steps. We can start by implementing the lookat node on here first. We need to select it to see the available options. On Bone to modify, we are going to select one of the eyes. Let's see. We can select the left eye for now. We have here these values of the lookat axis, but let's leave them for now. Because on target we need to select on lookat location, expose as pin. As you can see, the node now shows more information than before. We can now configure the lookat axis values. To know which axis we need to select, we need to go to the skeleton, and we need to search for the eye now. Let's scroll down. On here. We can now see where the axis of the eye bone are pointing. Let me put the camera to a slower speed. We can see that the Z-axis is pointing forward, the Y-axis is pointing down, and the X-axis is pointing to the right, so Y has a negative value. The most important axis is the one that is facing forward, and that is Z for this bone. So we can change that value now on lookat axis. The lookat node comes by default with Y at 1, but we need to set it at 0 and set Z at 1. And on lookup axis, by default we have X at 1, but we need to set it at 0 and set Y at -1. We can see that the Y axis is facing down so that it is a negative value. So what else? The lookat clamp needs to be set up. Let's put 80 for instance, and on interpolation time we can put 1. The clamp value determines the limit of where we want the eyes to point to the target, in this case the player. For now we can leave the node like that. We can duplicate it and change the bone to modify to the right eye one. We can then connect the nodes. This bit here, and this here. So we need the lookat location, but the alpha is fine. So we need to hook that up on the events graph. We move this node then, to here for example. And we need now to cast to first person character. This one. So now, we need to get player character. And this one we promote it to variable. We can select these nodes and type C to create a comment. We named it as create first person character variable. We drag the variable we've created from the left panel and select Get. We right-click on it and click on Convert to Validate Get. And now we can connect that variable to this node. I've just noticed that we can get the camera from the blueprint to get world location of it. This could be promoted to variable and we can name it as first person character location. So we can connect this to the variable. If we select these nodes and type C, we can create a comment again. We can name it as create first person character location variable. We can click on Compile Now and on Save To. So we come back to the anim graph. Drag the first person character variable to look at location. And also for the other node as well. We create a comment for this as well. I could name it as look at. We can compile and save to. So let's see. Okay, now you see that the eyes are looking at where the player is. But we see that the eyelids are static and it doesn't feel natural. This system could be valid for some other characters or objects, but we need to tweak it for MetaHuman characters. Let me show you in the Maya scene that if we see the eyes looking at different directions, the eyelids kind of follow that motion too. MetaHuman characters have a lot of morphs that are defining the shapes of the facial expressions. What is happening now in Unreal is that we have made a look at system based on the rotation of the bones, but it doesn't apply that motion to the morphs. So we need to create some poses or animations of 2 frames based on where the eyes are looking. The minimum needed poses are looking at front, looking at left, upper diagonal left, up, upper diagonal right, right, lower diagonal right, down, and lower diagonal left. Before continuing with anything else, I need to show you how the hierarchy of the face skeleton is. As you see, the rig has a root bone, a pelvis bone, and it continues up to the head. This is now the MetaHuman model imported into Maya as it comes from Quixel Bridge. We can see that the bones hierarchy of the facial rig starts at the spine _04 bone, not at the root as we saw in Unreal Engine. That might cause problems when we want to export the animations from Maya with that hierarchy and import the animations in the engine with the hierarchy that we saw. So what I'm going to do is to copy the rest of the hierarchy but the limbs and paste it to the hierarchy of the face. So let's do it. We can grab from spine 5 driver to thigh left driver and delete them. On the rig group, we can delete the body group too. The twist setups group could be deleted as well. I think this group could be deleted, and this one too. Now we can grab the spine 4 bone and drag it inside the spine 3 driver bone. So we delete this spine 4 driver bone as we don't want it, and rename the hierarchy then. I think I can delete this. Nope. Control Z. First I need to delete these remaining parent constraints. So now we can delete that bit. We need to go to General Editors, Namespace Editor. We can delete them and merge them with root. We can save as then. And name it as Hannah Full Face Rig. And now we have the hierarchy as the one we saw on the skeleton of the face in Unreal. We can delete the layers related to the rig of the body. And also the animation layers too. We go to Windows, Relationship Editors, Animation Layers, select the layers, go to Edit and Delete Highlighted. We can lock the mesh layers as well. And set up the scene starting at frame 0 and to 30 frames per second. Now that I'm seeing the lights on the outliner, I've realised that they could be kept in a layer. I can name it as Lights Layer. I can lock the layer and put it at the bottom of them. This file is ready for animation then. I have already done some 2-frame animations for each of the needed poses. So now we need to export the poses. We select the root now. We right click while the cursor is on the viewport. Select hierarchy. And export selection. We select the folder where we want to save it. Animation active. We set the range of frames that we want to export, 0 to 1 for the looking at front. We make sure that deformed models, skins and blend shapes are active and export selection. This process takes a while really, but I've sped the video up. We can do the same with the following 2 frames. Export selection. Start at frame 2 and end at frame 3. That would be for the looking at left. As this takes a while and it's doing the same for each of the mentioned directions, I'll skip that process and continue with the next step. And here we have the exported animations. We can import them to Unreal Editor then. On Skeleton, we select the one named Face Archetype Skeleton, and we don't want to import the mesh, so we uncheck that. We click now on Import All. We need to duplicate the front one. And I can name it the same but adding base at the end. We can now select all of them except for the base one and go to Assets Actions, Bulk Edit via Property Matrix. We expand the Additive Settings tab and select Mesh Space. On Base Pose Type, we choose Selected Animation Frame. And on Base Pose Animation, we need to select the base one. On here. Now we can save them. We need to double check going one by one. It looks like it hasn't saved that. So I guess I need to change that on all the animations I imported. Yippee! Let's pick the base one and click on this arrow to select it. We can save it now. We do the same with the next one too. Select the base, put it on here and save it. As I need to do the same for all these cases, I'm going to skip this process. So now we need to find the skeleton. Right click on it, go to create, aim offset. I can leave its name like that, why not? But I can put it where the animations are. We can now open it. We can type here jaw. On here we can put pitch. As minimum axis value we are going to put -90, and on maximum axis value we can put 90 then. And the same on here too. And here as well. This is a limit roughly for the angle of where the character can look at. On preview base pose, we need to select the Hannah look at from base animation. We can save it and make this bigger to see it better. In the centre of it, we need to drag the look at front animation, not the one ending on base. So let's pick another one, for instance the diagonal down left, to this corner over here. The diagonal down right on the opposite corner then. The down one, you know where. The look at left should be on the right side of the panel. Which ones are left now? The diagonal up left on here. The look at up, easy. Let's go now for the right side then. This here. And this here. So now if we grab this green point and move it around, we see that the eyes are moving depending on the blending that is being played between the animations that we have selected. As you see, the animations on the right side of the panel are the ones for when the character is looking at her left and vice versa for the right side of the panel. The blending works really nice actually with this setup I've made. Don't forget to save it. Now let's see how we can hook this up in the anim blueprints. We need to go to the anim graph. As you can see, we have the previous system we created. But we don't really need it right now, at least not as it is currently. We can delete this node now then. This system is moving the bones of the eyes but not the morphs for the changes on the eyelids. For that we need the aim offset. We need to connect this on the chain then. Let me see how to put this properly. We need to change this first look at node. We need to open the skeleton again. Let's see the bones that we have on this huge list. I think this forehead bone has the same orientation axis as the bones of the eyes. Let's search for any of the eyes to make sure. As you remember, we want to know this information to put the correct axis values on the look at node. I need now to create a virtual bone. We can change the name of it as it comes with a very long name. Actually, I need to copy its name. We select that bone on here, and we can leave the variable that was there before. Now we can see how to implement the aim offset node. We now open the events graph. We can open this box to make space on here as well. So now we need to create another cast, but this time we need to select our metahuman character, Hannah. And from here we can get owning actor. And this one we can promote it to variable. We go now to the lower part then. We now need to grab this Hannah character variable on here. Right click and convert to validate get. Now we can connect it to the flow. So we need to get its mesh as well. It's named as face. We can get socket transform. And in socket name we can paste the name of the virtual bone. And on transform space we need to select parent bone space. The idea is to get the rotation values of the virtual bone because it is looking at the first person character player. This is going to be very important to make the lookout work. We now select our invert rotator node because the values that we get from before are in world space and we need to transform those values to local space. We also need to create a brake rotator node that is going to split the axis of the rotation. So now we can promote this to variable. We can name this as pitch. We do the same with the other one. We can name this as jaw. At this point we need to connect those nodes to the chain. I think that I can create some multiply nodes to see that better for now. Let's try it with 3. We can connect it on here. We duplicate it and connect it too. So we select this whole part, we can create a comment and we can name it as create pitch and jaw variables. We need to connect the variables that we created now. We can drag the pitch variable to the pitch of the aim offset, and we do the same for the jaw. Don't forget to compile. We save the progress as well. Let's try it. That's cool. I like this version even more. Here I selected pitch that comes from the x-axis of the brake rotator node. I ignored the values that were written in brackets because it depends on the orientation of the bone we are working with. Let me open the skeleton again to clarify this better. I need to search for the eye bone now. If you rotate the eye on its y-axis, you see that it's moving horizontally. And if we open the aim offset, we see that the horizontal axis is jaw, so that is why I put the variable named jaw with the y-axis. On the skeleton, we have that the x-axis is rotating the eye vertically, and that is why I put pitch on the x-axis. I hope it makes sense to you. Okay. We tick this box over here to disable post-process blueprint. On the anim blueprint of the body, we can create a node named Event Blueprint Begin Play. I can copy the same that I did for the anim blueprint of the face. Right on here, so let's grab this stuff, Ctrl C, and Ctrl V. We don't need to cast to the MetaHuman character blueprint, so we delete these nodes. We make this smaller. We right click on the variable and click on Create Variable. I've noticed that this comment has a wrong name. I need to add "and Hannah" character on it. And also this bit at the end. And now we can copy this from here to the anim BP of the body and connect it to Event Blueprint Update Animation. We can also create this variable as we did before. Okay, that looks fine. We can now open the anim graph and go to the end of the flow. We separate the last node, because we are going to use look at as well on here. We can now select the bone of the head to make it looking at the player too. Now we can connect this to the chain as well. On look at location, we need to put it exposed as pin. So now we can connect the first person character location. Let's organise this better. We need to select the skeleton again, but now it is the body one, not the face one. We came here to see where the axis of the bone of the head are pointing. We have the y-axis facing forward and the x-axis pointing up. So in this case for this bone, it's okay as it comes by default. Before I forget, we need to set up the look at clamp to 45. On interpolation time, we can put 5 to try. And we can create a comment named look at. We compile that then and play the editor to test it. So you see that the head is looking at us and the eyes are doing the same too. That looks more natural, yes. And the looking at of the eyes is really nice too. I'm going to duplicate the character and put her on a different position and rotation. We can see that both head and eyes are looking at the player no matter the position of the characters. That's everything. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. See you around. Bye!